Faye, thank you for joining me. It's a very interesting conversation. And I remember we had this chat last week when the finance minister began announcing the stimulus packages in 5 tranches. Actually, when she began the announcement, we didn't know whether it was going to be 5 tranches. Now we do. At that point, we decided that we'd wait until all of the announcements had come through so that we can take a total point of view on all of it. And now we understand all of those announcements have in fact come through. So I have a very interesting panel of guests joining me right now. But before I get to my guests, I just want to put a couple of pieces of information before the audience so you can take a look at it yourself as well. I want to start by looking at the number of cases of COVID-19 we have in India right now. As of today, there are a total of 96,169 cases and 3,029 deaths. Now, there's a reason why I'm bringing this up to you in the middle of an economic conversation, because this is to point out where we are at the point where we are lifting the lockdown. Secondly, compare this now to China. In China, there were a total number of cases of 82,954. So we've crossed China right now by over 10,000 cases. Now, in China, they had a total of 4,634 deaths. We're at 3,029 at this point. So it gives you a sense of where we are right now in our battle with COVID. The second battle, of course, is the humanitarian and the economic battle that we're fighting alongside. Now, the finance minister made several announcements on that economic battle, and I want to take a look at some of them. But I also want to put up for you the problems that there are with these announcements, just to put it in a nutshell. I'm sure you read a lot of it came in terms of loans, that these money loans will be given to small businesses. These kind of loans will be given to farmers. Credit cards will be given to farmers. So nearly 75% of what was announced was in fact in the form of liquidity or in the form of loans. So this load actually then falls on the banks and is not necessarily coming out of the government in terms of funds. The second problem was a lot of the announcements that were made were structural reforms. They were long-term reforms that will take several years to execute. And so while they might be good plans in the long term, they will not ease the current pain that the farmers, the laborers, the small businessmen, the shopkeepers are going through. And that is a second problem. The third problem, and this has come out now because a lot of analysts had to sit together and do the calculation. It turns out that the total spend from the government of India is closer to 1% of GDP and not 10% of GDP for various reasons. One, because a lot of it is loans. Secondly, because a lot of it is long term. And thirdly, because a lot of what was announced was in fact not structured and told us. We weren't told that this is going to happen over the next 1 year or the next 3 years or the next 5 years, and in how much money are you going to spend in each year. So as a result, it's actually very difficult to arrive at the calculation. But it is right now, most analysts are saying it's between 0.7% to a little over 1% of the GDP. Let's take a look at some of the positives that have come out of this package. Positive number 1, an additional 40,000 crore rupees has been allocated to the Manrega or the rural employment guarantee scheme. Now, with so many people moving back to their villages, this is going to be really important. It basically means that there will be more jobs for them. And these are small jobs. These are seasonal jobs. They're not, of course, traditional jobs that you and I look at, but it'll be better than nothing. So that takes the total spend on Manrega close to 100,000 crore rupees, which is important and a positive. Secondly, some of the structural reforms for farmers will be important in the long term. Releasing them from the APMC and removing some of the produce from essential services will mean that farmers will have a little more flexibility in selling their produce, but it doesn't, like I said, help them with what the problems are right now. And finally, the liquidity and the loans that I was talking about earlier that have been offered to businesses will in fact ease some of the pain for businesses. But will they pass on that easing to their workers? We don't know yet. Now, we have to couple this with a total view on the fact that the labor laws are being changed in several states and that the government has, in fact, as of today, withdrawn its circular. Remember, the government put out a circular in the beginning of the lockdown 50 days ago, instructing or asking all businesses to pay their workers and their freelance workers or their contract workers. That circular has been withdrawn according to the business standards reporter Somesh Jha today. And that's a very interesting thing in my mind. I also want to point out, personally, for me as a citizen, as a journalist, one of the things that was slightly worrying was that from day 2 of the lockdown to day 50 of the lockdown, we were told constantly, wait, the government is coming up with something, wait, the government is coming up with something. And then we got this 5 tranches of stretched out announcements. It would have been better if we were given a clearer point of view on what the government was planning. It makes it easier for everyone, especially those running businesses, to plan out their businesses. All right, so this is where we are. This is my analysis of where we are, but I will open this up to the panel. And I want to point out to the panel, because we are using Zoom, and it's a little difficult for us to moderate, please allow each panelist to finish speaking before you come in with a rebuttal. Let me know, gesture to me, and my producer will then open up mics as you can speak, because when you speak one on top of the other, it becomes very difficult to understand everyone. So everyone will be given an equal opportunity to speak. Guest for today, Mr. Mohan Guruswamy, who is a senior economist and he used to be the advisor to the Finance Minister of India. So he's seen the inside of government, which is an interesting point of view. Santosh Mehrotra, Professor of Economics at JNU, also a very senior economist. Mr. Baz Malkit Singh is the former president of the All India Motor Transport Corporation. Again, like I keep saying, I like to go back to Mr. Singh and his association, because the trucks, when the trucks are moving, it's blood supply, it's circulation. It means the economy is healthy. Professor Aman Agarwal, who's the director of the Indian Institute of Finance, and of course, Dinakar Lanka, who is a BJP leader who joins us as well, who's been kind enough to give us his time. Good evening, gentlemen. Unfortunately, my team tried. We couldn't get a woman on the panel today, but we try every day. Sometimes it's a hit. Sometimes we don't manage. So today, I'm just going to have to do. Let me start with Mr. Guruswamy. Mr. Guruswamy, good evening, and thank you for joining us. We've had all 5 announcements now from the Finance Minister. What is your review on a scale of 0 to 10? Where would you place this as a relief package to ease pain of people on the ground? Mr. Guruswamy.
On a scale of 10, I'd probably give it 3.
Okay.
Because it does very little. It carries out reforms which are long overdue, but it doesn't address the issue of a complete collapse of the wage market and a loss of wages of 120 million people who are reduced to penury and starvation in one stroke. Doesn't do anything for them. And that is the big failure of this, and because of them, the consumption is going to drop, and this is a cyclical effect. This crisis has not been brought about us by some big fiscal or monetary policy collapse. It was an act of nature which descended on us. Lockdown, right or wrong, we had a lockdown. But you have to take responsibility for what is resulted from the lockdown. You can't have 126 million people without wages and without daily incomes and starving and suffering and all on the road. Now, that is some issue you have to address. You can address all the monetary issues, all the fiscal policy deficiencies, all that done by policy nudges and changes. But for this, you need a stimulus. And this kind of problem has never been seen in the world before. And India has got a unique situation. So you need to expand the economy, putting money into it. When you don't have money, you either get money from somewhere else, take it from somewhere else, or you print more money. That is what you need to. And that has not been done. And there is money to be had. There are lots of trees. You're just going to shake the trees up. You have 80 lakh crores of bank deposits. Even if you sequester the top 5% of that, and these are deposits, fixed deposits, and you give bonds against them, 5% bonds, you still get almost 5 lakh crore rupees. You can get some of the foreign reserves sitting abroad earning nothing, and monetize it here, you'll still get 5-6 lakh crores. You cancel leave travel allowances this year, and you say 1 lakh crores. You'll make that money available. Everybody's taking a pay cut. Everybody is going to the cleaners, except government employees who lost only one tranche of DA, but are the highest wage cohort in the country. They account for 11.4% of the GDP. Can't you take away 10% for this crisis, to tide over this crisis for 12 months? That needs courage and guts to do it. Take that money and put it into the DBT accounts, 5,000 rupees per head, into the 72% of the population that has Jan Dhan accounts, and then distribute the food. You've not done anything. So how can you call this a stimulus? It addresses only one side of the problem. It doesn't address the main issue.
Yes. Okay. So, Mr. Guruswamy, they're giving it 3 on 10 and saying that this addresses one side of the problem, but not the main issue. Let me bring in a different point of view. Professor Aman Agarwal, and here's a question. A lot of people have argued that Manrega is a good thing because it's not handing out money at this point, because you're not giving away money for free. There are no free handouts. In Manrega, people will actually have to work for that money. But the 2 Nobel Prize winning economists of our country have both recommended that the government do cash transfers as the only way to save the poor at this point. Which one of these 2 do you agree with?
No, Faye, I think both of their perspectives are correct in terms of their own understanding. Most of the economists who have got the Nobel Prize coming from India as an origination are not living in India for decades now. And they really do not know. They are looking at a bird's eye view sitting in the US and the UK and talking about Indian economy. That's something which needs to be looked at from a critical view when we talk about these economists who have got the Nobel Prize and sitting overseas. As far as Manrega or direct cash transfer, the government is doing some direct cash transfers to the 34 lakh crore accounts which have been opened up. So it is not that they are not following. They are doing multiple level framing structures in terms of providing the relief. And it is not only this government, but governments around the world are taking multiple steps in terms of inducing liquidity and into the systems and into the hands of the people to go about functioning. Now, this government in specific has laid down a broad perspective in terms of not only the liquidity framework, the direct disbursement, and also administrative measures, which are equally important in terms of the which comes to the mindset of people at large. So, I'm not very happy with what has happened, but certainly in terms of a scale of 1 to 10, as you asked in the beginning, I would rate it as 7 out of 10.
Okay, a 7 out of 10. I just want to point out, though, although I'm not a expert on the schedule of Abhijit Banerjee, I know from reading his last 2 books that the lion's share of the research was actually done out of rural India. So I'm assuming in order to have done that research, he needed to have spent some time in India. But like I said, I'm not an expert on his schedule. Professor Santosh Mehrotra joins us from JNU. Professor Mehrotra, good evening. Thank you for joining us. Do you agree with Aman Agarwal that this is a tone that the government needed to have set down? Again, it's also, from what I've read, an ideology question of, are you the kind of government that hands out money for work done, or does cash transfers into everybody's account, which is considered a dole, or it's considered sort of free money? Do you think, where do you stand on that argument? And do you think that the financial stimulus package is adequate?
It's not adequate. And cash transfer at this point would not be a dole. It would be sound economic sense. It would make very sound economic sense. It would not just be equitable. It would be an extremely efficient way of actually raising demand, because going in for supply side measures, which is what mostly the government has managed to do, as opposed to demand side measures, what we are going to see is the following, and I predict the following: that the economy is already spiraling downwards. The IMF misled everyone by telling us that the economy is going to grow at 1.9%. I'm sure very soon they will revise that estimate. Everyone will revise that estimate. It's highly unlikely that the economy will not contract this year. What is the meaning of that? That tax revenues will fall well below that. So much of what is intended to be spent, as we've been just told, will actually merely enable us to maintain level of expenditure that the government was planning to possibly maintain in fiscal 2021, when in fact we needed a massive increase in fiscal expenditure. Let us try and understand the difference between fiscal measures and other measures. Let us just contrast this situation with the 2008 global economic crisis. The 2008 global economic crisis was no greater than half of this crisis. And this is a much, much deeper crisis, point one. And yet, the government at that point came in with a 4% of GDP fiscal stimulus. Fiscal means public expenditure plus cuts in taxes. Excise duty, excise taxes were cut, other taxes were cut, and public expenditure was raised, the fiscal deficit rose. Yes, the criticism has been rightly made, and I'm a votary of that criticism, that fiscal deficit went on for longer than it should have. And as a result, there was inflation. But if we knew that mistake was possible, then why can't this government have actually learned from that mistake, put in a fiscal deficit? We needed a fiscal deficit at least the size of the previous one of 12 years ago, when the crisis was much smaller in scale. Yes. 122 million people are currently unemployed. This is unprecedented in the history of our country. So, with all due respect to anyone who is defending this, 1% of GDP in a crisis where the economy, you see, what will happen is that the government will have to monetize the deficit in any case, because the economy will spiral downwards further, and we will have to borrow more, and in the last analysis, this will have to be monetized by the central government. One final point, Faye, before I finish. One good news that came at the end of the 5th day was that the state governments were allowed to borrow more.
Yes.
No question about it. That is also a fiscal stimulus, because they are the ones who will have to undertake all the welfare measures that will be required under the circumstances. And let's remember that their GSDP is also going to fall. So they needed this borrowing requirement. It may well be that they end up borrowing that full 2% of GSDP, and there is some hope in there. But all I'm saying is that even when you factor that in the best case scenario, we might escape with a minor contraction of about 1% of GDP. We may well see in this fiscal year alone a massive contraction, in which case the central government will have to borrow more in any case. So not borrowing now is actually causing pain to the economy, causing pain to people, and what the focus should have been on demand expansion.
So let me just break this down for our audience who are not economists, and tell me if I've understood this wrong, Mr. Guruswamy and Professor Mehrotra. So effectively, what you're saying is, by giving sort of stimulus to businesses in terms of loans, the government has made sure that businesses can continue to manufacture product, which means that they can continue to create supply. But by not looking after the people on the ground and not putting cash in, putting money in the hands of the poorest through their Jan-Dhan accounts, what we're doing is making sure, what they've missed out is looking after those people who will buy those products. So you're making sure products will continue to be manufactured, but there'll be nobody to buy them. And as a result, the economy will go into a tailspin, and the effort that has been made now would perhaps not be as useful. Have I understood that correctly, Professor Mehrotra?
You've understood it very accurately, but I think Mohan wanted to say something. You should let Mohan say something.
The majority of the people in this country are very extremely poor. Now, if you take away incomes from 126 million people who spend 90% of their daily wages on food, they don't consume anything else very much from the manufactured sector. Maybe matchboxes and a few things like that. But food is the major expenditure of the household. Even the lower middle class spend 68% of their family expenditure on food. So if you take away food, what is there? They're not going to, even if you give them the money, they're not going to step up demand. But at least they will not starve. You've got a starvation situation ahead of us in the country. And
right. Okay, Mr. Prasami, I'll come back to you. Forgive me for interrupting you, but I just want to bring in the other two guests who haven't spoken yet. Mr. Dinakar Lanka of the BJP, straightforward question to you, and I'm asking as a citizen more than a journalist at this point. We were told it would be a 20 lakh crore rupee package, and this announcement was made by the Prime Minister himself. Today, every analyst in this country has calculated this is 2 lakh crore rupees or less, which is 1% of the GDP and not 10% of the GDP. In fact, the most complimentary calculation has come from State Bank of India that says that it is 2 lakh crore rupees or 1% of the GDP. Please, Mr. Dinakar Lanka, explain to me what happened to the rest of the money and why were we promised a large package and actually delivered only 10% of that?
Everybody has their own notion, but you can't see all the things with money. There are some measures which is provided liquidity into the system, which gives investment opportunities. Whenever there is a investment opportunities, automatically employment opportunities, existing employment opportunities created, as well as with these liquidity, another additional employment opportunities which is generated. Whenever the employment opportunities available, cash flows on hand of the employees available to you for their consumption, automatically it leads for demand and it requires supply. It is the model which has taken. Apart from that, there are the huge extent of the migrant laborers and the below poverty line families are there, keeping in view of their constraints already to the extent maximum possible. Food and essential commodities for up to June, from April to June, already Union government has given 5 kgs rice or 5 kgs wheat, dal, and cooking gas for each Ujjwala scheme under which whoever they are covered, and 500 rupees to Jan-Dhan account. Wherever it is required, to the extent maximum possible, we are transferring in kind. And finally, whatever the required cash which is directly benefiting and transferring to the respective Jan-Dhan accounts, and farmers also, you know that 2,000 rupees, whatever the Kisan benefit which has deferred, which has already delivered to their accounts, and to the extent maximum possible, wherever it is required, the Union government has tried to push cash into their hand. And in kind, whatever the services which made by the Union government in kind, also it should be translated into monetary terms. And some experts and analysts, what they are telling is print cash. Print cash is very easiest thing, but we should not go like a Nigerian model. We need to provide employment opportunity, earning capacity. It should lead country GDP should be grow, as well as earning capacity of each and every individual by means of liquidity into their hand from their salaries should be available. Meanwhile, there are some problems regarding to the migrant laborers and daily wages laborers. Everybody, you are also accepting that 40,000 crores additionally, whatever the Mandega, which has provided, apart from that existing 60,000 crores, is very much fair enough. And infrastructure, as one professor told, I accept that there should be a public spending is required. That's why Union government has considered infrastructure as the key. Even agriculture sector, 1 lakh crore extent of the infrastructure for which provision has made. Even the 3 lakh crore rupees for banking credit facility available through MSME also provide, on the one hand, employment opportunities, and on the other hand, it will be provide the contribution for GDP, because multi-oriented issues has considered by the Union government. On the one hand, liquidity, pumping liquidity. So many people, when the lockdown decision has taken, So many people has asked, where is the liquidity? Once the union government has taken measures for provide adequate liquidity under various measures, let you hear, please.
My question to you was this. We were promised a 20 lakh crore rupees stimulus package. We were delivered a 2 lakh crore rupees stimulus package. Remaining 80 lakh crore rupees, where is it?
I told very clearly now, the liquidity, whatever the opportunity for investment and infrastructure, these are all part of the encouraging the employment opportunities, and automatically the professors are what he told, that public money, spending public money is the scope through that infrastructure projects. Let you take 1 lakh crore worth of agriculture infrastructure facilities, for which whatever the union government has told comes under the public spending as well as private spending. Keeping in view of that model, union government increased from 3% to 5% of the GSDP to the state governments to get their borrowings, and union government also wherever it requires it get borrowing. That last opportunity only we keep printing money. We don't want to excess immediate effect because it leads inflation. It leads inflation.
Let me ask you this question. You did say, of course, those people who need, you kept talking about migrant laborers. Let me point out to you that the cash transfers that have happened were of 1,000 rupees that happened to widows, to pensioners, to disabled people. Several of those have not received the money because I'm talking to several associations that work with these people. 1,000 rupees, Mr. Lanka, 50 days ago. How many families are you expecting will survive off this 1,000 rupees? Second question, now you're transferring 2,000 rupees into the hands of the farmers. What are they expected to do with 2,000 rupees? Are they expected to pay their loans? Are they expected to feed their children? Are they expected to buy crop for the next Kharif sowing season? What are they supposed to do? Are they supposed to pay for, what are they supposed to do with 2,000 rupees? How is this adequate?
Yes, Disoja, please let me allow me. As far as farmers are concerned, 2,000 is for the purpose of their maintenance during these 50 days after adjusting food, whatever the essential commodities, all those things. Apart from that, this has made. And 74,000 crores during the last 3 months through agriculture markets, union government procured the produce, agriculture produce. Let you observe that this is a liquidity which pumped to the various. No, why not? Why not? You are asking that the government is not silent due to we haven't kept aside our responsibility by showing lockdown. That means we are doing regular practice without interrupting. There for liquidity, whatever it is required, we are doing. That means that cash, whatever we have allowed, it can be used by the farmers for their needs. Apart from that, agriculture loans, how much agriculture loans disbursed for last 3 months? How much? By showing Corona, we have stopped all these things because we want to continue as far as farmers regularly, whatever the practice it is. Apart from that, we want to take some reforms. Already, you people also told that those reforms are welcome. So we are thinking we want smooth running of the farmers. That is your notion. Whether you accept or not, that is the reality. Whether 74,000 worth of for farmers' output, whether purchased or not.
All right. Okay.
If you shake your head, means you are not accepting. But reality is 74,000 crores worth of agriculture produce, which has purchased by the union government through various state governments.
But they would do every year.
Working capital also provided.
Okay, let me bring in Mr. Singh, but let me just point out to my audience who's watching, a lot of what was announced in these 5 tranches, including this procurement, was either already in the budget that was announced in February or in the budget that was announced previous year in February. So it was already on the table. A lot of these things, including APMC, including essential commodities, was already being talked about. Privatizing coal, already being talked about. Who's going to benefit? Mr. Adani, in all likelihood. But these are not new things. What we needed was somebody to come and rescue the poorest who are starving on the roads right now. These measures, while welcome and might be well thought out because we've been thinking about them for many years, might not be that specific solution. Also, procurement of grain from farmers is the government's job. I'm not going to thank you for doing your job, especially at a time when we need you to do much more than your job. Mr. Balwilkit Singh, is going to come in now with a temperature check of what is happening on the ground. Mr. Singh, the last time we spoke, you said trucks are stalled all over the country, business is not moving, people are starving. Have things changed? Are things better now, Mr. Singh?
First of all, thank you for inviting me, for giving the opinion of the road transport sector, which is one of the main sector. 20 crore people are associated with this sector, and no movement will take place if this sector will not move. We are totally disappointed. We have been neglected, and on the scale from 0 to 10, as far as my sector is concerned, this is a road transport sector, it is 0, and not a single word had been uttered about the finance minister in the 5 press briefing in regard to the road transport sectors. We don't need the loans more. How we will be able to pay the loans which we have already taken? What about our EMI? Moratorium has been given, which will be due by 31st of the May. June, there will be the pressure of the bankers of the NBFC. We have demanded for a long-term measures. The economy is the demand. There will be a poor demand in the next 8 to 10 months. At least till September, there should be a deferment of the EMI with waiver of the interest, because we are bankrupt. There is no income left with us. We are unable to pay the salaries to our staff. We are unable to pay the salaries to our drivers. Any staff salary support is being given is in package? No. Compliance of the documents. Every vehicle before coming on the road had to compile with the various type of the document, and all the payments have to be paid in advance. Like insurance. Insurance we have to pay in advance, then we have to move the material. Otherwise, it is a illegal activity and the liability will be on the owner. Third party premium has been deferred till 15th of the May. That is on yesterday. And we are trying with the IRDA, finance minister, that you extend this validity, but no action has been taken. And that vehicle which are moving with that deferment had already stopped, because nobody will be taking the risk of plying the vehicle. If there is any third party claim, it will be on the transporter, it will be on the vehicle owner. We have already issued the advisory that it is illegal, you don't move your vehicle. If you are doing it, is your own risk and all that. Taxes, permit, fitness, although the deferment has been given till of 30th of June. But when the things will normalize in July, every single vehicle will require about 70 to 80,000 per vehicle to, in way of the insurance, taxes, fitness, to bring the vehicle on the road. There is no packages given to us. On the contrary, as we are not doing our business, our limit with the banker will be reduced. As we have not done any business for last 3 months, our drawing power will be reduced. And as I already stated, that there is nothing for us. On 25th of March, very second day of the lockdown, we have the conference with Mr. V.K. Singh, Minister of Road Transport Highway. And today also in the ASSOCHAM video conferencing, he admitted that he had interacted with the transporter and asked that essential supply should not be halted. In spite of putting the risk to our drivers with no insurance benefit to them, we had supplied the essential commodity. ये देखा कि कोई भी देशवासी भूखा ना सो पाए. Then on 29th, there was the relaxation that non-essential supply should also continue. Again, we wholeheartedly supported the government in expectation that from 20 lakh crore package, at least we will get some penny out of it, and they will hold our hand to put us on our foot. But nothing has been happened. We are totally disappointed, neglected, and what we foresees is that there is a strong resentment among the transport fraternity. 2 days back, we have the video conferencing all across the country. Members were totally dissatisfied with the package which has been announced, and automatically you will see in the coming days 25% vehicles which are plying on the road will be on the auto mode to stop their operations due to this all problems, and this will be a major crisis for the country because entire movement of the essential, non-essential will stop. Fruit, vegetable, milk, kerosene, LPG, paramedical equipments, pharmaceutical, all will be automatically stopped if no corrective action is been taken immediately. We have been requesting to the government. We have only asked for a minimum rescue package. We have not asked anything more.
Mr. Singh, are you
That
saying
has
you will go on
also not been
strike?
considered. Pardon me?
Are you saying you will go on strike, Mr. Singh?
No. Automatically, entire operation will be come to standstill. Automatically, auto compelled to stop the operation. Each of the every vehicle order will be auto compelled because I have already stated that when there is no insurance facility has been given, who will be there to ply his vehicle? Who will be there to ply his vehicle without taxes, without fitness, without permit? And on the contrary, the corruption which is in the billions, which is a study in the public domain, is increasing day by day. Checkposts have been started. As you I have quoted you last time also, Sindhwa checkpost is openly demanding the money of 2,000, 2,500 per vehicle. The normalization is not restored, but the corruption is already been started. So auto compelled to stop our operation.
So this is actually a very, very worrying thing that Mr. Malik has said right now. Remember, I want to remind our viewers, he is the former president and the current member of the All India Motor Vehicle Transport Association. They represent the trucking industry. And he's saying if things don't change, the trucks will just go off the road because it will no longer be viable. That's a completely different problem. I mean, we've now, up till now, worried about essential services being delivered and essential commodities being delivered, but they won't be delivered if the trucks go off the road. And this is something that should be of top priority to government. I want to open this up to rebuttals and also tell my viewers that you can ask questions right now. Of course, please use the super chat feature. It's next to the emoji smiley face where you can actually support myself and my team to bring you conversations like this. And of course, pay salaries, which is a problem for everybody. But going back to my panel, one by one, rebuttals. Mr. Mohan Guruswamy, we have, of course, Rajan Marcus, who said that he's a big fan of you and he wants to know what your rebuttal is of what you've heard from the rest of the panel. Mr. Guruswamy, go ahead.
What I thought of the... To come again, repeat the question, Faye.
What is your rebuttal to the points made by the panel, Mr. Guruswamy?
I have no rebuttal to the panel. You know, I'm not going to comment on what the official spokesman said, because that's a repetition of what the spokesmen are doing in all channels, everywhere, every day. It's the same old story that, you know, we are putting, for doing their job, they want to be congratulated. For spending their budget, they want to be congratulated. What are you going? Stimulus means more money outside your budget. Put that in to revive demand. Stimulate consumption. What does famine mean in India? It means a loss of purchasing capacity. And that is what happened to 150 million people. You have no money to buy food and to survive. So address that issue first. Then we'll talk about all the other reforms we need to do. And infrastructure, you know, there are no plans for infrastructure. There are no new additional infrastructure. When you had infrastructure plans in America after the Great Depression, they went into a road building spree. We have no announcements at all. And now, as far as I remember in press conference, the finance minister said for migrant workers, we have allotted 14,000 crores to build hostels for them. When will you build the hostels? Is the hostels the need right now for migrant workers? So you see, there's no lack, there's a lack of realism here, a lack of awareness of the true situation outside. I started going out of the city here, and the roads out of Hyderabad, and the roads are full on all sides with people, migrant workers going back to traveling from Hyderabad to Bilaspur, Hyderabad to Darbhanga, and all these places on foot. And people have not eaten for 2 days, 3 days at a time. Young children, 2 years old, 7-month pregnant ladies are also walking. You've got to address these issues.
Yes. Well, let me take the question to Mr. Dinakar Lanka. Mr. Lanka, two questions for you. There's one person who has asked this question. It's a fair question. If the problem is how we're going to spend money on the people who are walking, who are starving, who actually need looking after, then will the government consider cancelling the Central Vista project? And this is from Shahrukh Kotwal, who asked this question. Cancel the Central Vista project and save the 2,000 crore rupees that you're going to spend on redevelopment at this point, which is not necessary. Second point is also, you had a fly past and a showering of petals on hospitals by the Indian Air Force and the Navy and the Army. Couldn't that money have been used to feed hungry people? Is there a problem of prioritizing? Why are we doing things like this when like a Central Vista project or showering flower petals from helicopters when we don't have money, Mr. Lanka?
It is absolutely unfair. Whatever the amounts which required, already union government has disbursed to the state government to feed the migrant people and daily wage laborers. Nearly 11,000 crores has transferred to various government to provide food for 3 times in a day and shelter, to provide shelter. They have union government has disbursed, but some state governments, let I show the example, Andhra Pradesh as the example, 900 crores was transferred to the Andhra Pradesh. What Andhra Pradesh government had done, they had distributed 1,000 for each family, and that amount has been given by the state government out of their pocket, rather than fixing priorities. The priority is the migrant labor or daily wage labor, for which as the SDRF funds has given by the union government. I'm not telling about all the states. There are some states they are doing these kind of things. The funds are not effectively utilizing for the purpose. That is
Which
one
state,
thing.
Mr. Lanka?
Andhra Pradesh. And one more thing, already I have told in previous debate also, 32,000 crores registered construction laborers cess is there across the nation. In Andhra Pradesh, 250 crores was there. 1,000 for each registered laborer should be provided. 20 lakhs laborer are there. 200 crores shall be transferred to their account. Today also in MRO offices, agitations are going on by the construction workers, because even though union government has given instruction, that amount is not disbursing by the state government.
Okay.
These are the practical
All right,
problems.
let me bring in Professor Mehrotra for a rebuttal, and I'll bring in everybody. But to read out some comments, Shaurya is asking if Mr. Balbilkit Singh is saying that the whole chain of distribution is collapsing because of the behavior of the present government. Is that this point? I do believe that was the point he was making, specifically to do with a COVID environment. Vijay Chakravarti says, good work. Thank you, Vijay. Rachana Chatwani says, more power to journalists like us. Thank you. My team, I have Arun, Ira, and Amita who are working very hard. We're all very grateful for your support. Professor Mehrotra, we had Mr. Lanka of the BJP say that the current questions are unfair. The question about the Central Vista and the showering of petals is unfair because the government has already transferred 11,000 crore rupees to feed migrants to various state governments. Do you have a response to that?
I have a response to that. Most of the people who read that story were actually offended by General Rawat's gesture. There were retired very senior military brass who actually wrote to the president, if I remember correctly, asking the general to withdraw this kind of action. This is my taxpayer money. I would much rather it be spent on paying migrant workers who have lost jobs, and to use it to transport these workers back, because they are dying on the streets before they even reach home. Can we remind ourselves that until the 9th of April, there were more migrant labor who had died on their travels back home than the people who had died from COVID. Let's forget about that. Let me move on to some of the points that we've heard. Migrant labor, I would recommend to this panel, every member of this panel, to read 2 surveys. One is a survey of Swan, which is working with migrant labor across the whole country and has been talking to them. They brought out 15 days and counting at the end of the first lockdown, and then 32 days and counting at the end of the second lockdown. And not only they, but and yet another survey by the Azim Premji University carried out of 3,500 people who are supposed to be beneficiaries, all came to a similar conclusion that the majority of those who were supposed to be beneficiaries of these free rations or the 500 rupees, etc., did not receive it. So this is, I would strongly recommend to everyone who is out to merely defend what the government is doing, can we just look at the ground reality? These are the people themselves speaking for themselves in their survey. Let me turn to another point. Infrastructure investment of 1 lakh crores was announced on agriculture to help build a cold chain. Very good idea. This is something that many of us have been arguing for a very long time. 1 lakh crores. This is already included in the 1% of GDP, Mr. Lanka. So, I mean, let us not say that this is something, great that is happening. It is merely half of that 1% of GDP that we are minimal amount that we are talking about. And this will get spent over years. May I finish? This will get spent over years. Point one. On rather, what could have or should have happened is that the government had announced a couple of years ago an infrastructure, well, why a couple of years ago, just last year, an infrastructure pipeline of projects. The pipeline of projects is right there. We know what to do. We just have to allocate the money. Why is that not happening? What is happening is that we are going to plan now to build cold chains. Let me move on. Central government has transferred funds. Let me point out two very simple things. One, that
Professor Mehrotra, before you answer this question, let me just add a question so you can answer both at the same time. And this is a very valid question. Shish Kumar has said that there are conditions to the borrowing that the state governments can do based on the World Bank's guidelines. They have to achieve a certain amount of growth in order to borrow. Does that actually, a lot of states are worried about, it's not a blank check. They have to be able to perform. Is that a problem, Professor Mehrotra?
Honestly, I don't believe that that's a problem. I mean, those are reforms which ought to be carried out, and I'm quite okay with that. Let's just recall that the first half percentage point of GSDP is unconditional, and once those once the additional 1% on account of those 4 reforms are met, then the last half percentage point of GDP is also unconditional. So I'm not unhappy about that. So let's World Bank conditionality or not World Bank conditionality, most of us would actually expect those reforms to be carried out by state government.
Yes.
But let me go back to the point I was making, that much is being made, that we've transferred so much money to the states. Can I just remind everyone that the states have been crying themselves hoarse for the last 6 months, that GST, which is, their portion of the GST, which is collected by the central government, has not been transferred to them. It is their right. It belongs to them. It is collected from their own people. It should have gone back to them. The central government has not transferred it. That's a much larger sum of money than 11,000 crores. Point one. Point two, I was appalled that it was announced that the central government will release funds which are due to firms from whom the government has procured, MSMEs in particular, that we will release funds which is due to them in any case. And government is calling this a fiscal stimulus. For God's sake, this is the right of the people who have already supplied you goods and services. They should have been paid in any case in time. You haven't paid them in time, and now you're going to pay them, and that's being part of the announced as a package. Please give me a break. Finally, when the US government makes an announcement that it is putting in a 10% of GDP stimulus, all of it is fiscal stimulus. The trouble is that most people who come on these channels and defend the government perhaps don't even understand the difference between monetary policy or banking actions, which is 90% of this package, and fiscal stimulus. Fiscal stimulus means actions through expenditure and actions through tax cuts. Unfortunately, our fiscal stimulus is the size of only 1% of GDP. Now, so there is a real conceptual lack of clarity among most people who try and defend the government, leaving the government rather unfortunately defenseless.
Okay, thank you, Professor Malhotra. Professor Aman Agarwal has not placed his arguments yet, but interesting just to explain to our audience, the banking action and fiscal stimulus. Banking action is when the government says, you know what, we will make sure that you can borrow X amount of money from the banks at 1% less interest. Now, you still have to fill out the forms and the bank still has to grant you a loan in order for you to access that money. And it's still money that you have to pay back. And that's banking action. 75% of what the government has done so far is that banking action, as Professor Malhotra was pointing out. Fiscal stimulus is where the government actually takes out money and spends it and says, here is 5,000 rupees every month, feed your children, pay your electricity bill, pay for water, pay for gas cylinder, stay in your houses, stop walking. This is the problem. Now, for someone who has put his child on his shoulders and he's walking on the highway, offering him a loan at a lower interest rate is going to make no difference whatsoever. What's he going to do? He doesn't have food. He's not going to fill a form and look for a loan. It's not going to solve the problem. That's the point I believe that Professor Malhotra was making. Rebuttals from Professor Aman Agarwal. Go ahead, please.
You see, Faye, very interesting points, and I've been listening. I think I do appreciate what Mr. Singh has raised, very practical suggestion, and the government should consider in terms of implementing and smoothing the lives of large number of traders, and as they should also in terms of filing their returns and documentation on time. But very critical. First of all, it's not a fiscal stimulus. I think they should not be confused with a fiscal stimulus. Secondly, even if they bring out and say that the charitable institutions, tax dues and others, which would have taken longer because of the lockdown, would be released, which are dues payments. And in fact, my tax dues are also due because there were some taxes which are cut by the banks on fixed deposits which have been cut. And I have been waiting for them also for the last few months. It's just that it's a relief which is going to be there because then I will have liquidity in terms of dispersing these salary commitments which I have. So it is not that it is not a relief. Secondly, it's a mixed bag of monetary, fiscal, and administrative measures which have been talked about in the 4 to 5 days recap which is there. Now, I don't know how to get this 1% and 10% figure, which is there from 10 to 1%. It's interesting to see, and I would love to look at the data because the data is not complete. Nirmala Sitaraman has not given out the complete data. The trains which are going out.
Not true. All the data is out in the picture. Not true. Simply untrue. Simply untrue.
Sir, can I?
Please do, sir. Please do. But don't make factual errors.
When you were speaking all about fiscal stimulus, where it is not a fiscal stimulus. You are an economist yourself, you know it very well. Okay? I'm saying again, trains which are going out, and Nirmala Sitaraman made it very clear, 85% is to be paid by the center and 15% by the state. Now, those trains are moving. They're not moving empty. They are moving with people. Certainly, they're not satisfying all the needs of the people of migrants which are there. And not going on the humanitarian ground. In this country, the state of affairs in the last 75 years, because of the people who have been leading the government in the past also, they are largely responsible for it. Are we looking for an NPA crisis which was there in the 2012, and the way we had to liquidate almost about 18 lakh crores to banks, which was being waived off by various governments, including this government in the previous term when Atal Bihari Vajpayee was there, and the Congress government in the 2 terms? Are we looking at that kind of a fiscal stimulus to be granted to people and then creating a mess for the people at large? I think we need to really reassess what are we talking about. There is going to be lag. Banks loans, you all know about subordinate loans to be given last time. What are subordinate loans?
No, Professor Agarwal.
RBI has to give those instructions. They will come in due course. They cannot happen overnight. She is trying to do whatever best can be done within the framework of what she has in hand, trying to suffice all. And no one in this world, not even the United States of America, can provide relief to every citizen in the United States of America, being the richest country in the world. Right. So let us please try and understand and appreciate what is being done. Yes, You must come out with solutions. And even this package which has come out, in my opinion, will raise the fiscal deficit to about 5.5 to 5.75% in due course, because as she also said, where am I going to get this money? I may end up taking loans. I may end up raising bonds.
No, Professor Agarwal, first of all, and this is me, so please, to say that no government is going to be able to save everyone is unfair, because right now we're not able to save a large population of people. We're not saying one or two, we're seeing large population of people who are going without food, without electricity, without medication, who are walking on the streets right now in the middle of the Indian summer.
He did speak all those things already. You are not giving opportunity to me. He has spoken all those things already. He has raised various issues. He hasn't interconnected one issue to another issue.
Mr. Lanka, you want an opportunity? I give you a question.
Definitely, I need opportunity because
Agarwal.
Agarwal.
Let me ask the question. No, let me ask the
Yeah.
question. One second, let me ask the question. This is the Business Today article from the 16th of May. Big beneficiaries of tranche 4 stimulus, it says. Adani, Vedanta, Tata Power, and Anil Ambani's Reliance. It says basically the major beneficiaries of the finance minister's 4th tranche of economic relief will be business groups like Adani, Anil Ambani's Reliance Group, Vedanta, Kalyani, besides Tata Power, JSW Steel, GVK, Hindalco, GMR. Are these the people who are walking on the highway, Mr. Lanka, who need the stimulus right now? Please explain to me.
Can I? Will you feel that those package which covered MSME is for Reliance, Vedanta?
No,
For those who purposefully it has given. No, 1 minute. You have asked the question. If you are interrupting means you should not have any preoccupied. You should not have any preoccupied mind. You have asked the question. Let me give my answer, and then you ask the question. When Agarwalji professor speaking series of things, you are allowed. When I am giving answer from my side, you are interrupting. You please allow me for 2 minutes, and then you ask the question. First, as far as migrant laborers are concerned, yes, it is the huge problem. Union government asked all the state governments that provide how many migrant laborers are there in your state. How much they have given? What is the real figure? We are discussing around 12 to 14 crores migrant laborers are there as per our feeling. Whereas state governments has given less than 5 crores figure. Where they had gone remaining 9 crores, because there was no proper enumeration on migrant labor. You are asking that how the assistance should be provided to the migrant laborers. It is the one problem. There are some people who already left their home places. Some people due to the problem of the local level where there is no employment, and some people they felt the panic to reach their family members due to the corona, what happened at their family. These are all the problems. That's why the lakhs and thousands of the people are walking to their destinations. It is the problem. Union government has given direction to the state government. Food and shelter provide wherever they are. Stop them and contact with respective states to transport them by arranging rides. But all these kind of measures Union government is taking. But here problem is the state governments should take adequate measures. Let you take example as West Bengal, what she is doing, whether allowing the union government facilities to operate their migrant labor. Let you see that the Uttar Pradesh, how can they get 280 railway facilities, railway trains they have used to get their migrant labor? It is the problem. It is the problem. They are not speaking truth, and they are speaking conveniently certain things to make some allegations against the government. If we tell all these things, you are stopping. That is the problem.
Okay. Now, here's my question. According to the Business Today, it says on the 16th of May that the biggest beneficiaries of tranche 4 stimulus of the government will be Adani, Vedanta, Tata Power, and Anil Ambani's Reliance. What is your response to that?
Absolutely unfair. Farmers are not pertaining to the Reliance Adani. MSMEs are not pertaining to the Reliance and Adani. Don't make these kind of comments by showing your finger negatively on the government. It is the fact. MSMEs are 12 crore people dependent on MSMEs. 20 crore people dependent
So I
on
believe-
agriculture.
One second.
The gentleman, Professor, I am unable to understand. 1 lakh crore infrastructure investment also he has made negative comment. Means I am unable to understand what kind of mindset these people have. And his hypocrisy is very much clear. We don't have any knowledge. How can he make such kind of comments? Those people who doesn't have knowledge, are you calling for debates?
Okay, Mr. Lanka, you are not answering my question. Now, basically, tranche 4 of the government was coal privatization, coal blocks, airports, defense products, and power distribution. Now, these are the companies that stand to gain the most from these reforms. Now, what is the need, first of all, to bring in these reforms at this time? Secondly, is it not true that they will benefit the most? I'm not talking about that was tranche 2.
Don't you want any employment opportunities in coal sector? Don't you want to revive the discoms? Apart from the existing restructure, whatever we required due to COVID and the new opportunities, and those opportunities we are losing should be safeguarded.
Okay.
We can't leave all those things to air.
Okay, so now let me bring in Mr. Singh. Mr. Singh, this is what I placed before you. Mr. Lanka says this is how we will bring in employment opportunities in the coal sector, in the power sector, in the airport sector. What about your employment opportunities, Mr. Balwant Singh of the transport sector?
As the states are demanding for their rightful due in way of the GST, we have been demanding our rightful due, which is pending with the government in the form of the TDS, which is not been released since last many years. And in this package also, no announcement has been made in this regard. Secondly, MSME 3 lakh crore loan is being given with no collateral. And surprisingly, MSME Minister, Mr. Nitin Gadkari, has announced that 5 lakh crore is due to the MSME. If that 5 lakh crore is due to the MSME is paid, then why they need the loan of 3 lakh crore without collateral? So as far as for the road transport sector, once again, I would like to highlight that the minimum rescue package should be considered by the government on the priority, which is the need of the hour. Otherwise, the entire supply chain logistic will come to a grinding halt. It is a time to government to wake up before it is too late.
It's time for government to wake up. And last point, I'm going to give this back to Mr. Mohan Guruswamy. Mr. Guruswamy, there were several things, and I grant this to Mr. Lanka. Several of these things will probably be very beneficial in the long term. So, for example, 1 lakh crore rupees spent on infrastructure of farming. I believe this was also announced in the budget. Privatization of coal, privatization of defense, power distribution, all of these came in the budget. Is it sleight of hand to include it in our COVID stimulus package? Or actually, we should stop calling it a stimulus package. It should be called a rescue package. People are dying. Government is going to rescue these people. This should be a rescue package. Is it sleight of hand to include this in our rescue package and say, this is how we get it?
It's not a sleight of hand, it's brazen fraud. That money is already going to be spent in the budget, and you say, I'm spending it now. You do procurement, which is a regular activity, and you say, I'm doing it now as a stimulus. That's all rubbish. Stimulus really means putting additional money outside the budget, bringing it in and putting it to work. Because you're going to have a contraction in this quarter of 25 to 30% of the economy. And for the rest of the year, there will be a contraction. The contraction, annual contraction, will be no less than 5%. It could be 10%. You've got to address those issues. And for that, you need additional stimulus, money outside, put it into outside the plan, outside your budgetary plans, and make things work. You have no plans of that. The bankruptcy of abilities is being reflected there. You have not a single new plan. And you're dishing out all kinds of old rubbish and saying that this is what I'm doing now. You have to do that. The TDS giving 2% off now does not mean that you're excused of that. You still have to pay taxes.
Absolutely.
Offer, what is the stimulus? I'd like, Professor Mehrotra said, you have to understand what stimulus means. Now, you can continue like this and you can keep thinking that you can fool all the people all the time. Well, best of luck to you. When people,
this is one.
Then, there'll be a different reaction.
Yes. There's one question that has come in for Mr. Malik, and this is from Partha Tripathi, who says, what is the minimum rescue package that the logistics industry needs, Mr. Singh? And hopefully Mr. Lanka will carry that to the government. Mr. Singh, go ahead.
Already I have stated that we don't need any new loans. We are worried about our existing loans. There should be a deferment of the EMI at least for a long time. That is till September. There should be a compliance of the insurance, road taxes, goods taxes, permit, fitness before, and that has to be paid in advance. Although some relaxation has been given, जब हमारी गाड़ी चली नहीं है तो हम टैक्स क्यों भरें? When I have not plied the vehicle on the road, why the tax should be paid by us? It should be a waiver for us. Insurance, last 3-4 months, most of the vehicle are standing idle. There is no claims are there. For that period, there should be waiver of the insurance, and there should be a deferment. As I already stated, when this compliance will be over, insurance compliance, the relaxation is over by 15th of May, and most of the vehicle will be coming to standstill. And the permit taxes, which is been treated as valid till 30th of June, what about July? Each vehicle will be needing around 80,000 rupees minimum to put back on the road. From where that money we will get? Because we are without any job, without any business last 3-4 months. Is there any working capital will be provided to us? Soft loan without any interest will be given to us. This is the minimum rescue package which we have submitted to the government, and we are reminding almost daily to them. But nothing has been done. When they need our services, we are not helping. It is our duty that we are supplying the essential commodity in this moment. We are supplying the non-essential commodities. But we are not treated as a human being, not part of this country. Even though this is the biggest industry, 20 crore people are associated with it. 90 lakh vehicles are there, which we are applying day and night, but nothing has been considered. Not a single word has been uttered in the 5 media briefing in regard to the road transport sector. Totally disappointed. We are feeling neglected, and there total resentment on the grounds.
All right, I'm going to leave this here because we've run out of time, but I want to thank my panelists. I just want to point out a couple of sectors who have turned out and said that they are disappointed, just like Mr. Singh has pointed out. The transport sector, the restaurants and hospitality sector. Restaurants are massive employers, not just of waiters, cooks, people who drive trucks, bring produce, they buy from farmers, they have security, they have all of these people. Not a word for them at all. Even the farmers are suffering the same thing that Mr. Singh is pointing out. They have loans that they have to pay. The poorest farmers are the ones who grow vegetables and fruits. The ones who grow tomatoes and onions and brinjal and bindi. These are the poorest farmers. These are the ones who have lost the most. They need more help than what the government is offering them right now. And there are experts in this country who can tell the government exactly what is needed. We don't have to fire shots in the dark. And finally, and this is my point of view, in the last 2 years, the government has run roughshod over privacy to make sure that everybody has an Aadhaar card. They have said the combination of Jandan accounts and mobile and Aadhaar, which is what the government calls JAM, gives them access to every single individual, if not almost every single individual in this country. They've said, we know who every person is. We know their bank account, their mobile number, and their Aadhaar number. Use this information that you put together for this very reason, to put money in the hands of those people who cannot feed their children right now. When someone has not worked for 50 days, that person will run through their entire savings if they have any at all. They cannot pay their rent, so they are now thrown out of the houses or the hutments or the slums that they were living in. They cannot pay their phone bill, so they are now disconnected from information and they don't know where the nearest shelter is, what sort of special loan the finance minister has informed. They don't know. They have not paid their bills. They don't have electricity. They don't have water, and they have no means of reaching their families. That is why they're walking. They're not walking to make you look bad. They're walking because they have no other choice. Give them money. That is the only solution. Because all of your arguments about fiscal deficit and general health of your economy goes out of the window if people are dying of hunger, if children are going to sleep hungry. That is the only thing we should care about. These are extraordinary times. No government in the world has an answer. There's no one solution. But we need to be able to learn and prioritize correctly. Central Vista project, bottom of the list. Hungry children, top of the list. This is the priority. Central Vista project, bottom of the list. Showering petals on hospitals, bottom of the list. PPE systems and careful protection for doctors, nurses, and ward boys and maushis, top of the list. Prioritize, please. That is what we need right now. Smaller businesses, shopkeepers, restaurants, transport industry. These are the guys who need our support. The Adanis and the Ambanis and the Tatas of the world will survive. Because it's a circular thing at this point. We need to protect the ones who are most vulnerable, not the ones who are strongest so that the money will trickle down at some point to the ones who are at the bottom. We don't have that luxury. By the time the trickle happens, the bottom will be dead. In the long run, we'll all be dead. Thanks for watching. Good night.